those are the people I truly serve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, part 3 of the 9/11 deep dive with Adam Fitzgerald. We're going to get into Alex Station and all that good jazz, man. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. We dive deep into a lot of this stuff through a lot of these episodes, but this is one of my favorite ones to record, so I really think you'll like it. I really think you'll get into the information that we're spreading on this one. If you're like me, you like BBC, and there's nothing like a BBC in your mouth. So if you want the lingering flavor of a BBC in your mouth, go to foxandsons.com. Foxandsons.com is where you will get a very nice smoked chocolate BBC in your mouth. Go to foxandsons.com for your big, bold coffee. And if you sign up for an order of more than $20, you'll get 15% off if you use zero as your code. So go to foxandsons.com for a great big bold coffee. That's your BBC. Put it in your mouth. Maybe let it linger there for a little bit. Let them know that you've come around because of Year Zero, and use the code ZERO when you make any order over $20 for 15% off at foxandsons.com. That's Fox, the letter N, sons.com for your big, bold coffee, baby. RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a shitty libertarian. He's a shitty person. He's a shitty business owner. And he's a shitty graphic designer, which is why he needs your charity at RyanBunting.com. Go to RyanBunting.com and give him all the charity you can give him, because Ryan Bunting is a starving artist. He's a shitty artist, but he's a starving artist. So feed that fucker at RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. LibertarianInstitute.org. That's where you'll find me, Patrick McFarlane, Kyle Anzalone, Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Dave DeCamp, Will Porter, Kim Robinson. All of us motherfuckers are over at the LibertarianInstitute.org. Every once in a while, you might run into a Jim Bovard or a Ron Paul. But go to libertarianinstitute.org and enjoy all of the content that we are creating for you over at the libertarianinstitute.org. It's for you, by us. Because you couldn't do it right. No, I'm just kidding. Go to libertarianinstitute.org and check out all the work we're doing, because we're working really hard over there. So, libertarianinstitute.org. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. Part 3. Here we are. Adam Fitzgerald. Let's go, man.
Hey, man. Good evening.
What's going on, dude?
What's going on? We got a lot to talk about here.
Yeah. Able Danger and Alex Station. Yeah. Like, we're going to dig into some of the nuances now. We're getting in. We're going to get people past all these names that they can't pronounce, that only you can pronounce.
And yet I don't know the simple names of Jim and Bill. Go figure. I have a friend who's a concierge, by the way, We do concierge security for a building, business building. And I've been there 6 years. So one day couldn't remember William's name, Sky William. So my coworker knows what I do. And she goes, I don't know how you don't remember these regular names. Why don't you make, he goes, how do you remember these Arabic names, which are very long, but you can't remember William? She goes, I know what to do. Why don't you make believe everybody in this place is in Guantanamo Bay and you'll remember their names? I thought that was funny. I love telling that story, by the way. It's great. You're probably right.
Oh, well, that's a fair assessment.
But Able Danger is one incident in history and a program, very covert, that often goes ignored. And it's such an important period in history because everybody, seems to talk about CIA, not so much the NSA, the Israelis, the Saudis. What about the Defense Intelligence Agency? And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there was infighting that was happening between Alex Station and those involved with Able Danger too. So that caused a lot of what we saw on 9/11, a lot of the incompetence that we saw taking place on 9/11 was caused because of this infighting that had its roots back into the late 90s, early 2000s.
Interagency fighting that's been going on even decades prior to 9/11 happening, but during pre 9/11 intelligence operations like Able Danger, like Alex Station, even the Bin Laden unit in New York in 1998, they were all trying to access, the best information possible, which could lead maybe to a capture or even a kill program regarding Bin Laden or even members of Al Qaeda. And what happened was you had a bunch of agencies and individuals with a lot of egos and a lot of pride and a lot of malfeasance, and maybe even worse, some nefarious agendas that could have prevented 9/11. Thomas Drake, the former senior executive of the NSA, once said that the NSA, just them alone, the amount of information they collected could have stopped 9/11 altogether. Same thing for the CIA. They had enough. And what happened was you got the superiors of both agencies that basically later said in congressional inquiries that followed after 9/11 that basically said, we lack the manpower. But yeah, okay, they lacked the manpower, but what they didn't lack was information. And that's the conspiracy that should be talked about. You can lack manpower or whatnot, but you had the information. You could have stopped it. And for whatever reason, you didn't, which leads into other conspiracies as well. But, I digress. But
so wasn't it the access to information that led to the formation of Alex Station, right? It was like, oh, we've stumbled across like Bin Laden's like satellite phone and we've wired it. So now we need people to sit here and just work on this. And so that's where Alex Station came from. Is that not correct?
No, it's still, you got it right. Now, what happened was that the CIA knew about Bin Laden, but at first they didn't think he was nothing more than a terrorist financier. They certainly knew about him, maybe even going back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, when he became involved, and CIA Operation Cyclone, which may or may not have funded him indirectly. He didn't take direct funding. There's no evidence for it. But nevertheless, they've heard about Bin Laden many years prior. And what happened was, after he came to Afghanistan, Bin Laden, he started ramping up operations against the United States. Remember, in 96, he creates the very first fatwa declaring war against the U.S. military in Mecca and Medina. And so now the intelligence agencies are picking up the areas saying, all right, we got to take this guy seriously. The FBI just basically got to, hear his name for the first time in 95, 96. The CIA knew about him for a long time. So did the NSA. So, but how much did they knew? That's the question. We don't have that information public yet. One day, maybe, hopefully we will. But they had it, let's just say they had a head start. And then the CIA then created, Alex Station, the Bin Laden issue station, codename Alex Station, to get all the intelligence agencies working under one roof, sharing information about this individual and Al-Qaeda organization. Now, the problem, and we'll talk about this, we have in part two, was were they willing to share the information with each other?
And so this is where Operation Able Danger comes in, right? Because it was like we have the bin Laden issue station over here, Alex Station, operating, but then there's this group, this conglomerate of people that are like, no, we need to work on it from this angle. And so they start doing something separately. So we have this compartmentalization problem that is taking place. Am I getting that kind of correct?
Yeah, that's kind of correct. I'll give you the brief rundown. General Peter Shoemaker, who is the chief of staff for the U.S. Army, and General Hugh Shelton, who is the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, in the I want to say in the fall of October, November 1999, constructed a high priority, very covert operation that would begin using special operational team members to begin a very thorough electronic monitoring investigation into the global network of terrorism. And the code name is called Able Danger. Very few. This is a very covert program, more covert than any program the Pentagon had designed in the 1990s. Very few people in the Pentagon knew about it. Even the Secretary of Defense didn't know about it. It was members of the U.S. Army, particularly through the U.S. Special Operations Command, also known as SOCOM, and the Land Information Warfare's Activities Division, called LIWA for short, which supported the Intelligence and Security Command of the Pentagon. The Able Danger program was designed as an operation to develop very sensitive information as well as public information in the transnational terrorism field, which involved the Joint Special Operations Command and the Defense Intelligence Agency. The information didn't come from like government databases, nor was the information classified. It was only known to members of this very covert group, and of course to Shoemaker and Shelton. It was an open source collection database. The operation, however, was covert. So they used open source database and closed source database. Well, closed source information, I'm sorry, is information that is classified. So they used a combination of both. And I'll name you the people that were involved. There was 5 people that were involved. Navy Captain Scott Philpott, who is the Able Danger team leader. U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Eric Kleinsmith, who's an Army Major and Chief of Intelligence of the Land Information Warfare Activities Division. James D. Smith, who's a defense contractor for Orion Scientific Systems. Orion Scientific Systems, if you don't know, is the company that created these charts, that the information that was gleaned upon about pictures and organizations connected with terrorism. And last but not least, Dr. Eileen Presser, who is a PhD and analytical lead from the Land Information Warfare Activities Division. And so,
how are they operating with such a small crew under such a big operation? It seems like there's so much to do with so few minds to work on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. So this is where the Land Information Warfare Activities Division comes in. Eric Kleinsmith, who I've interviewed for the Darkened Hour podcast, basically told me that what they were embarking on was unprecedented in terms of data collection or data mining programming, as it's called, collection of information. And so what they were using was unorthodox methods at the time that was seen as foreign to these old faces from the Pentagon and Signals Intelligence divisions of like the NSA or the CIA, and even worse, the dinosaur methods the FBI employed at the time. So basically, Schaefer would a company like, say, for example, I'm going to give you a great example. Schaefer would accompany like the CIA representative from Alex Station to SOCOM headquarters in 1999, which was located at the U.S. Army Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And he told the people at Alex Station, the representative from Alex Station, that Able Danger was going to use certain individuals and signals intelligence at the Land Information Warfare Activities Division using this high-powered, fast-rate collecting data mining program, which would be shared with the CIA if they wanted to. They would also share with the FBI and other agencies, because Schaefer, who I've interviewed as well, basically said he naively believed that everybody was working on the same page. However, he found out in short order that wasn't the case, because this person, whose name is unknown, is classified, said to Schaefer at this meeting that the CIA will not be working with you because Alex Station will consider you a threat to them in regards to outperforming them in regards to information collected. So Schaefer is just, throwing his hands up because, I thought we were on the same side here. And so I'll read you the quote that he wrote. Schaefer wrote a book called Operation Dark Heart. Okay. And I'll read you a quote. He said, quote, "I clearly understood the difference," the CIA rep told him, according to Schaefer. "I clearly understand. We're going after leadership, Al-Qaeda. You guys are going after the body, Al-Qaeda. But it doesn't matter. The bottom line is CIA will never give you the best information from Alex Base or anywhere else, even a counterterrorism unit. CIA will never provide that to you because if you were successful in your effort to target Al-Qaeda, you will steal our thunder. Therefore, we will not support this," end quote. Just studying, right? So Clyde Smith and Dr. Eileen Presser would begin data mining collection through these programs that would collect open source information from, let's say, cafes, online internet cafes that terrorists would hang out in, or viral media that peer-to-peer media that they would talk with these forums. And the programs that they would use were, up to date, like very futuristic intelligence collecting data mining programs. And it was so much more effective this way because what they did was I think in 6 months, they were able to collect 3.5 terabytes of information, which at that time, just astonishing, the amount of information they had. And what they uncovered was that there was terror cells inside the United States. In fact, there were two that they named. One was under a group under Omar Abdul Rahman, who is currently in prison for his role in the Landmarks bombing plot. But that cell was inside the United States cell. And also, too, Muhammad Atta, Marwan al-Shahi, and Ziad Jarrah, Hamburg cell, members of the Hamburg cell who were involved with the 9/11's operation. But in 1999, they were inside the United States. So they collected all this information, personal, impersonal, and even classified information that's not been revealed to the public, and basically collected all on this data mining program, Able Danger. And it just basically outshined anything Alex Station did. Now, what the Able Danger didn't do was human intelligence. That's what the CIA had over them. But that wasn't the idea for Able Danger. Able Danger was just specifically a data mining program.
Why was it that they separated the two operations?
The Alex Station and Able Danger?
Yeah. Why wasn't Able Danger brought in as part of Alex Station?
Well, I think basically, the first Alex Station was created first, obviously. And then in 1998, the FBI created the Bin Laden unit under John O'Neill. And then in 99, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is basically the military arm of the Pentagon,
right? They
decided to basically ramp up intelligence regarding their own intelligence using these very unprecedented measures, which wouldn't be accepted at the CIA and the FBI or the NSA at the time, because they were all running separate operations. Now, I agree with you. Why wouldn't all these agencies work together? Be in harmony and working with true hegemony within one another, and they would get so much done this way. When you think about it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, why are you trying to compete against each other when you all have different specialties?
Right, but that's exactly what the military and the intelligence apparatuses are about. It's about competition within, not primarily, but that's a big reason why. Is that competition is like who wants to get the best information possible by any means possible, and what agency will do it unprecedentedly. After 9/11, Tommy, it was much worse because these guys didn't care about walls, didn't care about private regulations and rules protecting the civilians. All that went out the door after 9/11. And now all this community, especially with signals intelligence, it's called the Five Eyes. And Five Eyes meaning the countries like the United States, Canada, I think it's
Britain, Australia.
Australia. Now, instead of them like separately working with them, now they work as one unit. Yeah. And it's more than 5 countries. Now it's like 30 countries sharing information one another about their own citizens.
Really?
No warrants either.
I didn't know it was more than 5. I thought I was still
a lot more. It's like 30 something countries now.
Yeah, that's insane. And see, that's one of the things a lot of people don't recognize that came with the Patriot Act, right?
Oh yeah.
Like maybe it's illegal because of the Fourth Amendment for the CIA or the FBI to spy on you. But it's not illegal for the UK to spy on you, and it's not illegal for the United States to gather that information from the UK that they have gotten about you, right? So you have kind of these, it's like these outs, like you have these little doorways where you can enter into spying on anybody in any given way. And it's legalized. And, we put so much emphasis here in the United States on the legality of how these spy agencies operate. But these are the guys who are creating the laws, really. I mean, that's like, there's no doubt about it that when you really boil it down, who's making the laws, who's creating the laws in their benefit, it is those people that you don't want all up in your business. So you end up after this whole clusterfuck that happened between Able Danger and Alex Station and 9/11 actually taking place, the merging of all of these industries and all of this intelligence has actually made it worse on American citizens because their focus isn't on threats to the country, threats to you and me. It's on threats to their power.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, after 9/11, the Bush White House created legislation through the White House Council, people like John Yoo, David Addington, Alberto Gonzalez, where they created legislation claiming that enemy combatants, by the way, that's a term very vague. What's an enemy combatant? Could not be provided.
It's MAGA, right?
Now it is. Like now it is.
Isn't that what it is? That's what I thought it was.
But now
it's MAGA.
Right.
MAGA is an enemy combatant.
Yeah, they could be, but they're labeled enemy combatant. But back then, it was, everybody just said, oh, these are going to be Al-Qaeda and Arab terrorists.
Yeah.
But they left it vague for a reason, because in the future, that term could be labeled to anybody who goes against the state. Now, here's why it's so huge to follow up on that, is that this determination used to come from the Department of Justice, the FBI, under Attorney Generals, even from the White House Attorney General, John Ashcroft. But when Dick Cheney made this legislation possible while Bush was on vacation, by the way, in November of 2001, incidentally, conveniently, Cheney sidestepped the Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, sidestepped the Attorney General John Ashcroft, created this legislation with White House counsel, because Addington was Cheney's personal lawyer, and created this memorandum where basically if anybody who's captured and is an enemy combatant. An enemy combatant is supposed to be defined by the Department of Justice. Well, no longer the case. Now, enemy combatants, anybody who the State Department thinks is an enemy to the United States.
Right.
So that's why it's so huge to basically, to understand what is enemy combatant. Enemy combatant is whoever the President of the United States says it is an enemy combatant. That memorandum was passed in November of 2001. It is the most important memorandum nobody talks about. And so what happens? They go to Afghanistan, they go to Iraq, they bring back all these like Pashtun farmers and illiterates and say, and they torture them using the CIA's rendition and torture program on these private planes and basically torture these people. Meanwhile, I think at one point Guantanamo had 810 prisoners. Now I think it's like 27.
Yeah.
All those people that they released had nothing to do with terrorism.
I remember the push back then to give these people fair trials too. And I know because John Kiriakou, a lot of these people didn't even end up entering the United States. They were sent off to black sites.
Yes.
In like Turkey, Syria, Somalia, all these third world countries, they kind of look the other way when torture is taking place. How did this operate within the spectrum of Alex Station? Was this part of their operation? Was it not part of their operation? Like where does this all come together?
Well, it's separate. The CIA's rendition operation actually was separate to Alex Station. Funny is at the time under the Clinton administration, the rendition program was created under Clinton. A lot of people say, "Oh, it happened under Bush." No, the program it facilitated under Bush after 9/11, of course.
Yeah, it was taking place under Bush, but it was like put into like activity under Clinton.
Right. Yeah. So actually, the first rendition program involved the Egyptian national, a terrorist. Actually, he was renditioned to the United States. But nevertheless, Clinton actually made the memorandum about the rendition and capture program using the CIA to do so in foreign countries, where they bypassed laws such as countries that would have a anti-rendition program, saying that the United States didn't care about other people's countries' laws and regulations if they are actually engaging in terrorism or even suspecting in terrorism. The United States has the full authorization to go into that country, willingly or not, and capture that person and rendition him back to the United States.
So when they're doing this, is this under Alex Station? Is this like what they're given the authority to do, what they're told to do, or is this something kind of off on? Because we've heard a lot of horror stories, and so identifying where these things occurred and who was accountable for it.
Oh yeah, no. I wasn't clear before, so I have to apologize. So the Alex Station is basically a subset within the Counterterrorism Center, but the Counterterrorism Center, who is involved with the rendition program, Alex Station has nothing to do with it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
They're basically about human and signals intelligence involving Bin Laden and Al Qaeda, nothing more.
So what Alex Station was dealing with was the people on the ground. So the interpreters that the military would utilize, the people that were like giving up information, as John Perkins might write about in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, like the people that he were dealing with. This is what Alex Station was doing. And then you had Able Danger over here collecting metadata. But the real down and dirty stuff was happening above these people's heads.
Yes, and Alex Station may not be or may be aware of a rendition program, but they weren't engaging in it. For example, like the DCI, the Director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet, would authorize on or approve the rendition program, even though he is the director of both the counterterrorism and the Alex Station programs. Nevertheless, Alex Station may not even be aware there's even a rendition program going on. Very few, like top level management, would know, but even just like foot soldiers or case officers, they may not be aware of it.
Do you think that the upper echelon, like George Tenet and these guys, were familiar or were aware of the torture programs, the black sites? Do you think they understood what was going on?
Yeah. I mean, you can't basically just say definitively yes, but he had to have known. He's the director. I mean,
well,
if any,
the reason I ask you is because, like, last week we talked, we started our conversation. We're talking about Sidney Gottlieb. We're talking about MK Ultra. We're talking about James Jesus Angleton, Alan Dulles, basically saying, all right, here's your objective. Whatever you have to do to meet that objective, do it. I don't want to know all the details. I just want you to meet the objective. Mm-hmm. Do you think there was any of that going on with George Tenet?
It's a hard question to answer because it's not definitively known. But I would submit to you that it would be quite shocking if Tenet didn't know about it.
Okay.
Because he had, like I said, certain people do have to have a supervisor's permission to capture somebody, to use a private plane, to bring them back into the United States, and basically have a set of questions using very brutal methods, torture, or as they would say, enhanced interrogation techniques, which is basically torture. And someone has to sign off on this.
Right. I wouldn't even say concerned. I'm just looking at the fact of the matter that there's so much compartmentalization in these agencies that it's like, how far does it go? And like, what are these people allowed to know? Does George Tenet tell his right-hand man, I want this outcome, whatever it takes? And then therefore his hands are clean because he's not saying, oh, don't, like, he's not saying go torture that fucking guy. You know what I'm saying? He's just giving him an outcome he wants. And he's like, all right, that's what you got to go do. Like, whatever you got to do to get that done. Therefore, you know, you got plausible deniability in this situation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the key right there, plausible deniability. So you want a detachment from the actual crime happening.
Right.
But you're not totally detached. You have information, but that information can't be attached to that person receiving that information at the highest levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're aware, like, in other words, Tenet would be aware, Kofor Black, who's head of the Counterterrorism Center, they would be aware of it, but there's no direct information leading to them saying, or a piece of paper saying, yes, I'm authorizing you for torture.
So when you're looking at, like, when you kind of step back and you're looking from a meta point of view and you're seeing all these operations kind of overlapping with each other and taking place all at the same time, what are you seeing? Do you think there was one person that was kind of overseeing all of them and understood everything that was going on and was kind of like directing it all? Or do you think it was complete compartmentalization and these people were all acting independent?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, you would have compartmentalization, of course, to make it a lot more complex for the public eye. And also, too, there's a level of malfeasance, I want to say, I could say, for certain, because, with 9/11 data collection, there seems to be, a lot of information, but the handling of information was not defined responsibly or acted upon responsibly. I can't make that leap of faith, Tommy, and say, oh, they wanted, like they manufactured this. I can safely say, like with 9/11, they wanted it to happen because the benefits outweighed the many outweighed the few. So
you're saying there were people at the top incentivized not to proactively do this, like, because I kind of know your stance on that, but there were people at the top incentivized to overlook.
Yeah, and you know who they would be? They would be people in the intelligence community, because why, the State Department doesn't need to know, even though they're the power, but they don't need to know. That's where their plausible deniability comes from.
All right.
Also, too, Bush is a public figure. So is Cheney. So is Rumsfeld. They're always in the public, and the media is always interviewing them. But Tenet, not so much. Black, definitely not so much. And even those that we don't know who are involved with these very covert operations, like Able Danger, they're not in the public eye, and nobody's talking about them. And when there are congressional inquiries interviewing them, they basically play, we shared the information. They'll even lie. And, nothing happens to them. Why? Because information is power. And when you have information, you basically can control kings and queens of the world. You can manipulate operations before they even happen. That's what I think 9/11 was about. For people to say, well, how would they, blow up the World Trade Center if you want to believe that they came down by bombs or a thermite of some sort? Well, they would have to know about an operation coming up where planes would be crashing into them. Well, why not make it happen? And then you can manufacture a crisis, having the towers collapse or whatever. But that's what 9/11 basically is. It was an operation created by terrorists that was known to the Intelligence Committee, the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and they manipulate the plot. That's basically what that is. And people want to make it, more complex than that.
Well, we're touching on something. I think this is a good time to bring this up. So if it's not a good time, like we can put it off for another time, just let me know.
All right.
Operation Northwoods.
Oh, good. Nothing to do with 9/11.
Right. But people will use it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because there was the Bajinga plot that like Operation Northwoods was a thing. It was a thing. Like, we don't want people to think that we're overlooking the fact that all the chiefs of staff had signed off on Operation Northwoods, and it was only because Kennedy refused to sign off on it that it didn't happen. And there were planes involved. There are these little nuggets, right, that people like grab onto. And so how do we separate that from the Bajinka plot?
Well, for one, you have to make various comparisons, right? A period of time and technology, technological advances. So, for example, Northwoods, which was a proposed false flag operation that originated from Lyman Lemnitzer, who was the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in which he proposed to use the CIA to both stage and commit acts of terrorism against American and civilian targets and blame it on the Cuban government.
I kind of feel bad because I am like fucking putting you on the spot, asking you all the hard questions.
It's all right. I'm going to try my best to answer them.
Because I know, but there people hear these things, and it's like, all right, how do we talk about these things? How do we address these things? So I appreciate your willingness to address this.
No, I'll try. And I can understand because this comes up a lot. So I'm glad you asked this, by the way. So I want to clear the air.
I didn't know if it was the right time to ask it, but it just
it's all right. Because it'll lead right back up into Able Danger anyway. So that's good. So they proposed, one of the many various scenarios they proposed was to get like an aircraft and put American people on it and basically shoot it down and blame it on the Cuban government. There was also a simulation where there was going to be attacks on Cuban refugee boats that was supposed to be either a combination of real or simulated attacks. And what happened was the maximum amount of fatalities would be published by, of course, the media, who are under, the auspices of the intelligence community. When this was actually put on Kennedy's desk, Kennedy saw it, was, him and Robert McNamara basically saw it, and they were, horrified. This is coming from the Joint
Can
Chiefs.
you imagine? Can you imagine? Like, you're just like a normal like senator that's like, I'm going to be president, and you're so excited you became president, and somebody slides this document across your desk. You'd be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, this is gonna be a long night, Bill.
What the hell is this shit? I didn't sign up for all this.
Yeah, I wonder, like, when he saw that, I wonder what he said to him. He was like, I'm getting trolled. Like this can't be real. This can't be real. But no, he was very real. In fact, one of the Operation North, one of the influences of Operation Northwoods that really doesn't get talked about much is the Operation Mongoose project, which was created under General Edward Lansdale, who basically is supposed to be linked to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He supposedly was in Texas when it happened. But I digress. We won't go down that road. Anyway, because
we can do some episodes after we're done with 9/11. We can go Kennedy assassination if you want.
Sure, but there's far more people that are more qualified that can speak on that than I am.
Well, yeah, but there's people much more qualified than me too. I read their books.
Yeah, sure, yeah. But nevertheless, like these operations were in symmetry, and you have people in the highest positions of the Pentagon and even the U.S. military who are proposing attacks, false flag attacks, to blame it on Cuba. Now, that's the only similarity between 9/11. But the problem is that the truthers, I hate to use this example, is that certain truthers of the fringe mindset want to compare Northwoods and 9/11. Well, no, because you're basically assuming that the planes hijacked 9/11 were, they weren't real planes. Well, back in maybe in the Operation Northwoods, before the age of the internet or the cell phone or even, airline phones, air phones, yeah, you could get away with that because how would they know who was on those planes besides very few people, But on 9/11, it's impossible. You have cell phones, you have air phones, we have camera systems, being instituted just about everywhere at that time. So yeah, it's harder. And people made phone calls on those phones. And basically they got in touch with loved ones. Unless you're willing to say all those phone calls were somehow faked, all the people they got in touch with are, somehow, part
everybody's
of the
lying. Everybody's everybody's in on it.
Exactly. Yeah, you're making the conspiracy bigger than what it has to be. Why not just allow for the planes to crash into the targets and you kill them anyway? Because you got to kill them anyway.
What was it? Forgive me. I don't know this information near as well as you do. So was it flight 97?
93.
93 going towards the Pentagon? The one that
that's flight 77.
77. Okay, there we go. All right. So so during 9/11, when all this was going on, I was in basic training. I remember we had just gotten done with PT that morning and we're walking into Chow Hall and our fucking drill sergeants pushed us into the Chow Hall and pointed to the TV just in time for us to see the second plane hit the Twin Towers. Wow. All right. And one of the guys I was in basic training with was engaged to a stewardess who was on flight 77.
Do you know that stewardess's name?
I don't know her name off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I don't remember that much detail. It was a long time ago. You do remember this, right?
2000. I got my mind is shot too, man, Tommy. So I can't remember names anymore.
But yeah, I was one of the guys I was in basic training with. His fiance was a stewardess on 77.
Was it Jennifer Lewis?
Possibly, man.
Or Michelle Heidelberger?
Dude, don't give me the line. I can't tell you for a fact. I can't even remember his name. I can see his face, but I can't remember his name.
All right, nevertheless, anyway, but 77 crashed in the Pentagon.
But she called. I remember she called his parents, and we got a message from his parents, and she's like, "Yeah, we've been hijacked." Yada yada yada.
Oh, and Renee May
could have been. Possible.
She's a flight attendant. She's a stewardess, and her and Barbara Olson. Barbara Olson's not a stewardess, but Renee May is. So it has to be her.
Very well could have been, man. Very well could have been. But I remember the guy that day when he got the news. It killed him, and he's like, my fiance was on that flight. Yeah, and. So, this affected real people. It's kind of like the whole like Alex Jones, Sandy Hook thing that's going on. And I'm not going to I don't want to get into the details of that because I know there's a lot of nuance to what Alex Jones said, and I don't feel like arguing that. A lot of the truther movement is turning a lot of people off because a lot of people know someone who died that day.
Yeah.
And if you're saying that, oh, nobody died, basically, because, oh, it was a drone or it was this or it was that, it wasn't a plane, it was a missile. You hear that a lot with the Pentagon, right? Because a 14-foot hole. It was only a 14-foot hole. It couldn't have been made by an airplane, and there are people that lost loved ones that day, and you're not taking into consideration the reality of the situation that they're facing. You're defeating your own argument before you get to make your argument because you're making these insane claims, which is why I'll have Adam on to talk about this stuff, because he doesn't go fucking berserk and talk about all kinds of weird nonsense that I can't make any sense out of.
Well, I thank you for that praise. So
no, I'm sorry. I just feel like that has to be said because, like, part of the reason that I like the Libertarian Institute will host you and not Jason Burmis or some of these other guys. And forgive me for mentioning Jason Burmis. I don't have anything against the guy personally. I think he's trying to do the right thing. I just think he's wrong, and he's not thinking about the repercussions of what he's doing in some instances, and so, like, the reason we'll host you and we'll talk to you is because we have faith in you. We know who you are. We've seen your research. We talk to you. You're a friend of ours. And so we can trust you to be as honest and objective as possible when it comes to the situation.
Well, boy, you know how to make a guy blush on a date, huh? Hey, no.
I only expect to reach around, dude. No blowjobs is necessary on the first date.
You said that live now. You know that. You realize it, right?
Yes. Well, we're not live, but I'm not going to edit it.
No, you're not. I know you're not. Tommy. No, listen, thank you, Tommy. But look, I only try to provide basic information, tangible information to a subject that's been sorely maligned by fringe theories. And to me, I could have picked any subject. I could have picked La Cosa Nostra to study. I have more books on that subject than anything else. I could have picked Jonestown, which is another area of study of mine.
The Taliban is not much different.
No, there really isn't. But with 9/11, it was, I lived in New York and I saw what it did. And it changed not just, the perception of New Yorkers, it changed the world.
Did you were you there that day? Did you see the aftermath? Did you?
I was in New York. We saw this. We didn't see the plane actually go into the South Tower, but we saw the explosion on a rooftop.
Wow.
But
I'm sure that had a big impact on you.
At the time, not that it does, now it does, because I'm much more invested in it. Back then, I was more in shock than anything. But for me, this is the reason why I chose this specific area in history, is because it is considered the end of our innocence, so to speak, even though there was so much more dark history involved with pre 9/11. Take your pick, JFK, RFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all that, World War II, Vietnam, whatever. But 9/11.
One of these days, I'm gonna pick your brain on RFK, because you keep mentioning RFK, and I'm like, what I know about that, I'm not sure where you're coming from. So I'm gonna have to get into that with you, but. But jumping back to Able Danger, you can do the next. Sorry, audience, right? I have curiosities.
I know you do. You're like me. I want to know. I branch out. Sometimes I'll get lost in conversation, and I'll branch out to other areas and stuff. But jumping back to Able Danger too, after they collected this information, Eric Kleinsmith actually goes to SOCOM, Southern Operations Command, and speak with the lawyers there. And basically what happened was that they were using computers, these units, which collected huge amounts of data in a technique called data mining. Mm-hmm. And so they used Orion Scientific to create the charts. So now just imagine all this data that they collected, put it onto a chart. So they have bin Laden in the middle. They have Ali Muhammad, Omar Abdel Rahman, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, banks, BCCI Bank, Saudi Arabian Royalties Bank, all these other individuals that have
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed,
right.
all these
Yeah,
names.
everything.
The names, all the names we've been talking about for 2 episodes up until now,
correct,
are there, and they're looking at all these pieces and how they tie together.
Right, exactly. And so they're the only agency in the world that did this, to put it into chart form. Remember, the other agencies like the NSA, the CIA, they hoarded the information, didn't share with anybody, nobody, not even to other agencies. They kept it. But the DIA provided.
It seems like, all right, like maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the DIA was the only agency that was aware that the technological infusion that was occurring at the moment, because we still have to remember this is 2001. This wasn't 2021. This isn't 2022. So the technology that was available in 2001 still wasn't what we have today. But it was almost as if they were aware that this technological infusion was going to be the difference, and that was the only way to chart it. And CIA, FBI, NSA were still dependent on the 20th century way of doing things.
Right, exactly correct, Tommy. And you know what the problem is that this information, if shared with just, the State Department, for example, they just shared this information. They could have warned like immigration, for example, to stricter security measures, screening measures for people coming out of, say, Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, right? They could have done that, but they didn't. So what happened was, in February of 2000, Captain Scott Philpott, the leader of Able Danger, he organizes like this high-level meeting with General Shoemaker and General Shelton on the production and what they collected after Able Danger. And so they provided the charts provided by that was made under the information provided by the Land Information Warfare Activities Division. And so that the Southern commander lawyers, the Southern Operations Command lawyers could look at it and say, all right, this is legal and stuff like that. So they could use information and act on it.
Right.
So they would review the data from Able Danger. Now, all the information relating to the Hamburg cell, like Muhammad Atta, Mohammed al-Shi, and Ziad Jarrah, these were the terrorists that were identified by the Able Danger team that were inside the United States at the time. They were named U.S. persons because they were here on U.S. visas. So SOCOM lawyers basically said, this information can't be provided or shared with anybody else. And if you can't act on this information, you have a period of 30 days before you have to destroy it. And so in March of 2000, the operation all of a sudden started to come under harsh critics from like other competing entities. And so Schaefer had invited a meeting with Major General Peter Lambert, who's the Deputy Director of Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Operations, and members of the Joint Staff J32, people like Jerry Clark of the Senior Executive Services of the DIA. And they basically say, we're working on this program. We've got a lot of information, and we want to share with the FBI so they can act on the information.
Right.
And so Southern Operations Command said, no way. These are people, U.S. persons. We have lawyers protecting this. Now I'm going to come back to you, Tommy, later and tell you something remarkable about that.
It sounds to me like what you're describing is the reasoning behind the Patriot Act.
Yes, this would come later. I'm glad you said that. It actually originated out of this idea of the program.
Right.
Much later.
Right.
Now, Able Danger.
I'm trying to like just catch it all. Like,
yeah, no, it's fine. It's all coming. It does have a connection. Like there is a connection to it. But in 2000, Able Danger totally, in its entirety, named 20 people involved with these terrorist operations inside the United States. and also a mosque in Florida that Marwan al-Shehi and Muhammad Atta were going to, and even the address where they were staying at.
Is
Like,
this why DeSantis is such a threat?
I don't know.
Could be.
Is he?
Could
But,
be.
you know, get
Could
more
be.
of the terrorists than that. Soon it'll be you. You'll be the terrorist soon.
We are the terrorists, man.
That's right. Yeah, but that's the final goal, right? That's the goal, right? But in March of 2000, Eric Kleinsmith, the chief of intelligence for the Land Information Warfare Activities Division, was told by SOCOM lawyers to destroy the data. And regretfully, he did. He destroyed 3.5 terabytes of information about this program, which, if shared, could have prevented 9/11. But at the time, you know, they didn't think none of it. They said, all right, we have to destroy it. Fast forward to, you know, the program itself in the year 2001. Basically, Schaefer goes back into Afghanistan, you know, goes with the U.S. Army. Members of the Able Danger program shut down in 2001. They're told not to share the information with anybody. And basically, the program couldn't continue because nobody was going to fund it anymore. And fast forward to 9/11, you know, weeks after 9/11, according to Schaefer, and, you know, like I said, I've interviewed, he told me once, and it's in his book, Operation Dark Heart, that he got a call from an Able Danger team member, and it was Dr. Eileen Presser. And she says, meet me at a coffee shop. And so they did. And basically, she showed him one of the charts that basically wasn't destroyed. And she showed him a picture. And in the picture was Muhammad Atta.
Wow.
And she goes, we identified this. The program was right. We were right. We had the information. We could have prevented 9/11. And Schaefer's like floored by this. You know, so anyway, U.S. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. You're mentioning these names, and I know Schaefer. I don't know this woman you're talking about, but it made me think of something else. I'd found a book on Audible, and it was a woman who said she was in Iraq at the ambassador's palace or whatever in Iraq, fallen in love with an Iraqi soldier. She had all this information about what was going on with 9/11. And she had like turned this information over, and everybody ignored it. All I was gonna say is, like, when it comes to these types of stories, like there's a story out there like Lee and Me, right? About a lady who had a love affair with Lee Harvey Oswald, you know, like, and she knows that he was innocent because, yeah, look, we have to remember there are people looking to make money. Now, could they be telling the truth? Possibly. But how much of their truth, their story, can you verify? And you got to be very careful on what you're going to take in and believe and understand. The reason I talk to Adam about these things is Adam has been studying and investigating this stuff for 16 years. And so he's not an amateur. He understands that there are things that are going to pop up into his periphery that are not worth looking at. So if you hear something that you're like, oh, why doesn't he mention this? There's a reason he's not mentioning your favorite talking point. This guy knows what he's talking about. Now, I just wanted to get that out there because I want to make sure that people understand we're not selling a fiction novel or a spy thriller here. We're talking about actual provable events that we can actually trace the lineage of.
Yeah, I think that's on point regarding what I'm trying to do is I'm trying not to use speculation as a form of evidence. If I do, I'll even say, hey, listen, I'm going to be speculating here. So this way it doesn't come across as saying, oh, if I didn't say that, I'm saying it as a statement of fact. So in other words, I want to be very careful about what I impart to the audience regarding information because I don't want to mislead them. I want them to know something rather than believe something. And so if I seem cut and dry, and if I seem very
Well, that's why I want to break in right there, because like what you're talking about right now, I can see people like how their gears will be turning, be like, well, I heard somebody talking about this, and I heard somebody like, hold on, like that's not what we're talking about. What can we prove? What evidence do we have for what happened at this particular point in time? And that's what you're discussing. So you're not talking about somebody else's story that may or may not have happened. You're talking about things that are very easily provable.
Yes. Right, because I want my audience to become informed about information that they didn't come across initially. That's how you build a movement. Like you could build a movement based upon information that you provide that people can act on. I mean, I always use this tired example. I sound very repetitive, that you can't go to court using speculation or belief. I believe, like, for example, I believe that the government did 9/11. Well, all right, you can't just walk in and make such a charge because you could be held liable, for one, by the person you're implicating. And two, you look ridiculous, right? You have no evidence, you're just believing it. No, but if you go into court with information, actual tangible evidence, and make a claim that, hey, listen, specific so-and-so did so-and-so, and now you have a case, right? They can, hear your case out, but you have a case nevertheless. Right. But that's what I like to do. I like to basically be very cut and dry, and I do sound it a lot of times. And but basically, I'm trying to provide a service.
It's just and this isn't a slight to you. I just know that there's a lot of information out there, and you kind of brush up against some of it, right? Because these people take bits of truth and they expand it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when you're saying something, I'm hearing, I'm like, oh shit, somebody's going to think this. Oh shit, somebody's going to think this.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure that I'm like, all right, like, look, understand what we're doing here. Just understand our point. The point is we're not going to make loose change 2.0. Like, fuck those guys. Like, it's Adam has done a lot of work on this. It's like if you go to the Libertarian Institute, we have a complete history of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah, it's Richard Booth. I was just going to use him as a good example.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, what I was going to say is, you're our Richard Booth, like, for 9/11. Like, that's kind of like what we're looking at with you. You're coming at it very factual. This is what I've seen. This is what I can prove. These are the articles I've read. I'm not going to speculate. And so when you brush up against these things that people have expanded on, it doesn't mean you're going in that direction. And I just want people to understand that that's the way that you're approaching it.
Tommy, you keep talking this way, we're going to have to go on a date.
Hey, man, I'm down. Like I said, all I ask is a reach around on the first date.
And, listen, that's high praise, because Booth is very meticulous and he's very careful.
Very good.
He's fantastic.
Yeah. But my thing is, I don't want people to confuse what you're saying. I don't want them to like take like a sentence or something and run with it, because it's like, no, we're speaking in a very methodical way, in a very linear way for a purpose. The reason we're doing it the way we're doing it, there's a purpose behind it. And just like, I know people will start hearing things and start trying to run with it. And it's like, no, that's not where we're at. That's not what we're doing. Right? Like, we haven't even gotten to flight school yet. So everybody calm down.
Right. Exactly.
Like, it's that thing. It's like, just back it up. We're at a specific point. And just because, Adam's using a specific turn of phrase or referring to something specifically doesn't mean that you should like run off in this odd direction, because there's a direction that we are heading.
Right.
Sorry,
Right.
I feel bad for like interrupting, but at the same time, I don't want people to take you the wrong way.
No, it's well received, and that's what I'm all about anyway. But I'm about to lower the boom regarding Able Danger, and this is remarkable
because it's coming.
Really remarkable. And what happened is that when the U.S. invaded Afghanistan, Schaefer is in active duty. He goes to Afghanistan. And so the 9/11 Commission basically begins in 2002. And so what happened is on October 23rd, 2003, Philip Zelikow, the director of the 9/11 Commission, actually goes and meets with Anthony Schaefer at Bagram Air Force Base. And basically is in a tent area where two SOCOM lawyers are basically with Schaefer, and it was about Able Danger program. And interviewed Schaefer about this program, where he got the full authorization from SOCOM lawyers to basically talk about this program. And so he did. And this is the first person to know about the Able Danger program in the world outside of the Able Danger team and, SOCOM and the generals. So an hour and a half, he spoke about this with Zelikow, who basically handed his card to Schaefer and said, "This is remarkable. When you get back to the States, I want you to call me, and so we can keep in contact, because what you said here was important." Okay. So after that, Schaefer goes back to the United States and basically calls Zelikow, but he doesn't get an answer. He's probably getting, he was getting a runaround basically. So instead of getting with Schaefer, he speaks with a staffer at the 9/11 Commission and says, "Could you call at a later date?" Then something else would come up. He's, "Could you call later in future?" And basically, on the last call, he was told, and I'm going to quote you what Schaefer said to him. He said, "They have found all the information they need on Able Danger, so there's no need to talk to you or have you come in." That's what he said. Wow. So now Schaefer's stuck. Basically, he told Zelikow this operation. And what happens? Well, Schaefer tries to go back into tries to use the security clearance to the Pentagon, and basically was shut out. So they suspended his security clearance, all because Schaefer spoke with Zelikow, telling the truth about the program and what it uncovered. Unbelievable.
Jesus.
What they did to him. And so the Department of Defense officials.
If anybody's curious or interested, I would say go to the Darkened Hour and listen to Adam's interview with Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer. It was good. He comes across very honest and very caring, and I appreciated that interview, because it was like, it's easy to look at all these guys as the enemy, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't feel like an enemy to me. Like, listening to it, he's like, "I'm just trying to do my best shit, man." Like, I don't know what you want me to do. Yeah.
What's funny is that whistleblowers are often maligned. And, an actual whistleblower is somebody who blows the whistle on corruption or information that was basically uncovered, showing a crime being committed by either the intelligence community or Department of State, and they themselves become either arrested or detained and questioned by the very agency that they are part of. And
right.
So that's what makes a real whistleblower. Schaefer was actually revoked. His security clearance was revoked. His rights, he was actually restricted from duty, but he wasn't fired, because what they didn't want him was go to the press or go testify on his behalf. So they kept him in a state of limbo.
Right.
Understand? So they didn't take away everything. They didn't fire him or nothing. So he was in the military, technically, but his security clearance was taken away. And he couldn't, basically, because he was still part of the military, he couldn't defend himself anywhere, not even in the public sector. So there he was, basically couldn't do nothing. So he puts in a call, Schaefer, anonymously, to a Pennsylvania senator by the name of Kurt Weldon. And he basically says, he gives him a fictitious name and says, I got information for you about a program that was from the Defense Intelligence Agency that basically produced information about part of the 9/11 operation. And Weldon, after hearing a couple of phone calls, basically said, I wanted to meet with him. And Schaefer did. He met with Kurt Weldon and he told him who he was.
Right.
So Weldon basically immediately went to his staffer and said, I want you to call the staffer over at the 9/11 Commission. And I want to know what they had to say about why they didn't promote Schaefer's information. And so the staffer for, the staffer for Weldon was Russ Castle, that was his name, Russ Castle. And so, because I had the video of the Senate Select Committee with Kurt Weldon interviewing, and behind him is Russ Castle. So Russ Castle calls Chris Kojum, who's a 9/11 Commission staffer, and basically says, hey, Chris Russell says, hey, did you hear about, are you aware of like this covert military operation called Able Danger? And did Zelikow interview Anthony Schaefer? And Kojum says, yeah, we heard of it. And then Russell's like, why have you not put it into, because the report's published at this point.
Right.
So Chris Kojum said, why didn't you put it in the 9/11 Commission report? This is huge news. And incredibly, Chris Kojum tells him this. This is not taken out of context. He actually said this. It didn't fit with the story we wanted to tell.
Yeesh.
He tells this to Kurt Weldon, who's sitting right next to him. Schaefer's there. Weldon had like dropped everything. He said, what? He couldn't believe it. So that's what happened. Schaefer, then Weldon immediately goes to the House floor. And I have this video uploaded on my YouTube. And he's yelling, like screaming at the House Senate, committee, both Democrats, Republicans. He's screaming about how this is a national cover up by the Pentagon regarding the continued slander of Schaefer, who has an impeccable record at this point. Right. Is impeccable. And basically said, we need to do something about this. He goes, they don't want mud in their faces about not sharing this information that could prevent 9/11. And he's literally screaming. I'm not exaggerating. He's screaming on the House floor, banging the podium, stuff like that. CNN actually ran a report. And I think it was that ghoul, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer spread a rumor saying that one of his staffers or one of his secretaries was having an affair with Schaefer, who is married. And Wolf Blitzer spread that rumor. And you could hear Weldon screaming, we need to know who spread that rumor, who told that, because it was someone from the Pentagon who told Wolf Blitzer this.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, what they're trying to do with Schaefer was malign him in the public. That's what they were doing. And, Weldon's going nuts. Now, the next step was, now they conjured up a Senate Select Committee hearing of Able Danger. And leading that committee was none other than Arlen Specter. And if people don't know who Arlen Specter is, he is the man who made the JFK bullet, the theory, the bullet that travels everywhere.
Yeah,
it comes out
the
clean.
Magic bullet theory.
Yeah, exactly. Unbelievable. And it was one committee.
Arlen Specter and Chuck Schumer are two people you do not want to have on your fucking investigating you, because they make up shit.
You're right.
They just do shit. And you're like, wait, no, you're wrong. You're like, nope, it's Chuck Schumer.
Exactly.
It's like, nah.
Unbelievable. So they held this Senate Select Committee headed under Arlen Specter, and the committee heard from Kurt Weldon, Eric Kleinsmith, Smith testified, and Mark Zaid, who was a lawyer acting on behalf, I think, of Schaefer at the time. Schaefer is right behind him, but he can't testify. He's not allowed to. And last but not least, William Dugan, who is actually sent by the Defense Department, and he's the assistant to Defense Secretary for intelligence oversight. So in other words, they threw this muppet up there who had no real information about Abel Danger, but he's basically thrown into the lion's den. So basically, all Inspector talks to him about, and this is huge, and I'm going to quote this because this is the backbreaker. And what I want to do is I want to use the direct quote that I'm reading from the committee transcripts, right? So, I'm not making this up. So, quote, Specter, quote, "Thank you, Senator Sessions. Mr. Dugan, Muhammad Atta was not a U.S. person, was he? Dugan, based on what I have read in the press since September 11, 2001, I don't believe he was." Excuse me. He wasn't a permanent resident alien. He wasn't a U.S. citizen. He wasn't in any of the other categories. He wasn't in the country lawfully. For instance, a student visa or a tourist visa. That is not the same thing as a permanent resident alien. Specter, Mr. Dugan, you are the acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Oversight. Can't you give us a more definitive answer to a very direct and fundamental and simple question? Was Muhammad Atta a U.S. person? Dugan, no, he wasn't.
How much more direct could you get than the first answer? Well, he's like, no, he didn't belong here.
Right.
Like, in no way, shape, or form, there's no way this guy belonged here. Period.
Right, exactly.
Then he's like, well, can you give me a more direct answer? What are you, a fucking retard? What do you have, an IQ of 85? You fucking idiot. Like, run away, dude. Go jump off go take a long walk off a short pier, you fucking retard.
Now
that's why I hate these people, man.
I don't. Me and you both. Now here's the real crime. Because he said this, because Muhammad Atta was not a U.S. person, and this is coming from the Department of Defense, then the information that Abel Danger collected should not have been destroyed. Remember when I told you that SOCOM lawyers ordered Eric Kleinsmith to destroy the information because the information was concerning U.S. citizens, Muhammad Atta, Marwan al-Shayzi al-Jarrah? Well, here it is, 2004, at this committee, the Defense Department now reversing its role and saying, no, they aren't U.S. persons. So in other words, all the information Abel Danger had, they could have kept it and shared it with the FBI, which could have prevented part of 9/11. At the very least.
Right.
Unreal. That's why I wanted to read that part. That is huge.
All right. So, huge. I mean, the aftermath, I kind of want to do a full episode on the aftermath. Like, I really do. So I'm going to shift. So it's not because I don't think this stuff is important. I do. I absolutely think this stuff's important, but I do want to. But
there is no by the way, there is just a quick. That was the end of Abel Danger because they only had that one committee hearing. There was no follow-up hearings after that.
Really?
Yeah, that was the end of Abel Danger.
So, like, what did they? But were they able to work with anybody and do anything of any substance ever? It was just that one thing, and that was it.
That was it.
Wow. And how much did that cost?
I couldn't tell you, but
millions.
Yeah, well, I mean, who's the biggest waste spender in the world? Pentagon.
You're right. That's what I'm saying. That's millions of dollars. They just
what's even more
tossed into this for one hearing.
Right, for one hearing. Now, at the same time, that information was incredibly important and valuable that if shared with the FBI, because they wanted to share with the FBI and they couldn't, it could have stopped 9/11. Just does that sound familiar? The CIA did the same thing.
Thomas Drake said the same thing about the NSA.
Thomas Drake said the same thing about the NSA.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just one thing after another.
Oh, it's unbelievable. When you look at it in this context, this is the reason why I do these interviews with people like you, is I don't do them with everybody. Like I select the people I interview, right? I want people to know.
I'm like top echelon.
Well, you are for me anyway. But it's like I'm not going on some conspiracy site and say, hey, did you know a third building fell? Oh, no, hijackers are alive. You can't go far and you can't
Right.
go past this information, right? Because it stops right there. There's no hijackers. Well, there's nothing to investigate because if there's no hijackers, all the intelligence operations, one of them I just said, Able Danger today, we talked about, it doesn't exist because if there's no hijackers, this operation doesn't exist because who are they monitoring? Who are they collecting information on?
Well,
Nobody.
and how can you have a conversation about this with somebody who doesn't know anything about the Middle East or doesn't know anything about the way the government operates or
Right.
any of these things? So you almost have to have this like kind of baseline of all right, we're starting everything right here, and now we're working through this and trying to kind of mime through it. And I just happen to have done enough homework to be able to like kind of keep up with you on what's going on and therefore interpret it for the audience and those people listening that have never looked into it, you know. And it's just because, I mean, what else am I going to do? Like, so, but all right, like I said, I want to get into Aftermath. I do. And we're going to do, I think we're going to do a full episode on that because there's a lot to get into the Aftermath when you get into like 27 pages and all that shit. And we're going to do some on that. What I want to do is I want to continue with Able Danger and Alex Station right now. And I want to move into a direction of as the US was doing this and fighting against each other in a way, what was going on with the terrorists? What was going on with those that became the hijackers at this moment in time? This was what, 2000, 1999, 2000?
This is 99, 2000. Members of the Hamburg cell who were individuals like
when did they create that? Because that's actually a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So how did that come to be?
Yeah. Actually, 1998. Actually.
Okay.
So, like, without going into too much specifics, because that would take too much time. So you have people like Muhammad Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and Ziad Jarrah, all coming into Germany at various points of the mid 90s. For example, like Ziad Jarrah came to Germany from Lebanon in 1996, Muhammad Atta in 1997, 98. And so they all they got together at this mosque called Al-Quds, which is the most radical mosque in all of Hamburg, which is a major city in Germany. And they basically got together and lived in an apartment in Marienstraße. I'm probably butchering that name. It's called Marienstraße, which is a city in Germany. And they rented an apartment with all of them together, except for Ziad Jarrah. Ziad Jarrah would always live alone.
Why?
And he rented an apartment from a woman who actually drew a painting of him.
Why was he always alone?
What's that?
Why was he always alone?
That's a good question. And that's going to be a consistent finding all throughout even to the day of 9/11.
Should we hold off on the hamburger cell?
Yeah. No, not really. I mean, I could talk, about this in detail if you want.
No, I can't. We can. I'm just saying, should we hold off till the next episode or? Like, I don't know how deep how deep you can get on this.
Very deep.
All right. So you want, I think we've been going
I think
over.
that's what we should do because the Hamburg cell and the pre-intelligence involved is enormous.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah, we've been going over an hour. Like, I'll go all night with you.
No, I'm sure. But to get the attention of people, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna have to split these up anyway. So it's like, all right. Like, if we're gonna split them up, like, we might as well just go enjoy our night. And
sure, that's
unless
fine.
You just want to record everything in one night, and then we'll just.
No, that's fine. Let's talk about during the week or whatever.
So you want to stop there, hamburger cell?
Yeah,
because that sounds that sounds really interesting. The reasoning that he was staying alone the entire time, like and
I'll tell you why he does it, because it leads into my theory that I'm working on, and it's enormous.
That theory.
I
heard that theory.
Yeah,
I heard that theory.
Yes.
Yeah, that theory sounds good.
Yeah, it's enormous. I just don't have evidence for it, but boy, there's a lot of smoke with that fire.
Yeah, but if you can find something solid, man,
Sure. But yeah, I hate
because you know what you're
that.
looking for now.
Yeah, but that's right.
Yeah.
And I hate to do that, but I want the audience to pay attention because they hear 2 hours and it's like, because Hamburg Cell is tremendously important, especially with foreign intelligence. I'm talking about Germany
Mm,
and the CIA and the NSA and Israel that was involved with like these monitoring operations that began in the 90s. It's enormous. It's a lot. And
right.
it's not
I kind of feel like a dick for it. I feel like I interrupted you more tonight than I
that's
have
all right. That's
in the
fine.
other episodes. I I want the audience to understand what we're doing. And like the first couple of episodes is like it's like talking with you is like talking to Scott Horton. But now that we're
Oh,
getting into things that there's like that are on the periphery of their mindset that they've already kind of heard about, they kind of already understand. Like, I need to focus that attention in a specific direction, and I don't want them to run away with like their loose change arguments or their like truther arguments.
sure.
I want to keep them, like, spot on. And no, audience, this is not an insult to you. I just understand what has been out there for a lot of years,
Yeah.
you
It's
know.
unfortunate.
And none of us are immune to catching pieces of this information, right? And running with it. How many, I mean, you've been researching this for what, 16 years? How many years did you waste researching things that were like, oh shit, this was a dead end or stupid, or like I shouldn't have been doing this, you know?
Well, it wasn't very long, but you know what? We all came from that background of conspiracy, like fringe conspiracy. Like I would consider myself a conspiracy theorist because I do believe like there was a lot of information that we weren't told
Mm,
that's public. But a fringe conspiracy theorist is theorizing about irrational like scenarios based on information that doesn't exist. So that's what I would consider fringe conspiracy. Like the first 9/11 film I ever watched was a film called In Plain Sight, and it was produced by Dave Von Kleist, where they were talking about missile pods underneath planes that crashed into World Trade Center, and that there was no plane crash in Pentagon Shanksville. And so I believed that. I was like, yeah, there's very little plane debris in Pennsylvania, very little plane debris at Pentagon. That's right. But what I didn't realize was that much later, that I was comparing plane crashes, like intentional plane crashes with unintentional plane crashes. And if you look at the history of intentional plane crashes, which are extremely rare, but
right.
if you compare them to what happened on 11, you'll see some similarities. And one example I used was Germanwings 8925, which was recent. That was in 2015. A plane crashed into the Alps, and it was a first officer. The pilot went to the bathroom, and the first officer took the plane. He was suicidal, and he crashed the plane to the Alps. But you won't find a whole body. There was no fuse. There was no engines. There was no nose or wings. There was nothing to like resembling a plane. In fact, the biggest part of the plane was parts of the landing gear.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. And you know what, one of the things we're gonna have to cover that a lot of people have questions about are the passports.
Yeah, paper. Look, all right, if you're going to say passports, actually, like, for example, I'll use a quick example. There was a passport found in Manhattan, right? They found this passport and, it was doused in lighter fluid. I mean, jet fuel, right? So, but it survived. And a lot of the fringe movements say, well, how could it basically, explode on impact and paper survive? Why don't they just make the World Trade Center out of passports? Well, if you don't understand about motion,
That's kind of a funny
right?
thing.
If you can't understand, like for example, how can a human body not survive? Well, the human body is a dense property that's 90% liquid. What do you think is going to happen when it crashes into a building at a high rate of speed of 500 miles an hour, resulting in a 77,000 pound explosion?
Right.
Yeah, you're not going to find nothing left. However, paper can survive. And so, if, like, for example, if they're going to say that this is planted, well, then the passport belonged to Saddam al-Sistami, and that's a hijacker aboard Flight 11. But what was on Saddami's passport Well, he came from Saudi Arabia. Well, if the conspirators of 9/11, right, basically wanted to imply that there was hijackers on a plane, why didn't they say he came from Iraq?
Yeah, exactly. Why
We
would they?
invaded
Why
Iraq.
would they have pointed the finger to Saudi Arabia?
Right, exactly correct, Tom. Yeah. And also, there were ID cards found in Shanksville. CC Lyles, who's a flight attendant, actually, her ID card survived. There was a cab driver from Florida. His ID card survived. Are you going to say those are planted? What for?
Right. No.
Paper can't survive.
Right.
Flight 93 was carrying 27,000 pounds of mail, and it was seen all over, New Baltimore and Newcastle and Shanksville and Somerset County.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things you often hear.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
It's a very common, like, rejoinder. It's like, oh, well, the passports. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then you know what doesn't get talked about? The stuff that we're talking about in these series.
Right. Exactly. And that's why I wanted to get deep into it. Yeah. Like, the passports might be an anomaly. All right, fine. We can say that the passports are an anomaly, but what about Able Danger? What about all this other stuff? Like, what can we talk about that? What about all of these things that are so much bigger than a passport that nobody else wants to address?
If you want to believe in a conspiracy, well, the stuff I'm providing, and I'm not the only one. There are others out there. It shows even a bigger conspiracy than these people originally imagined.
Right.
Huge, bigger.
Exactly.
Bigger. Right. Exactly. And we have names to go along with it. You guys don't.
Well, all right. Well, let's call it an end for the night.
Sure.
All right. So plug away everything you got to plug.
Yeah.
And we'll pick up next week on part 4.
Yeah, that's fine.
And all my patrons and Substack subscribers that are paying me are getting these episodes as we're doing them. And so they're going to be released. What I'm going to do is I'm going to release them slowly out for the Institute, but then I'm going to do a full Substack with every link for every episode. So they will all be centralized in one place by the time everything's done.
Yeah. Hey, listen, just Google my name, Adam Fitzgerald, and 9/11. I come right up. But if you want to get direct information, _Adam Fitzgerald on Twitter. And I have a pinned tweet and has all the links to all the sites. I have my podcast is The Dark and Dour with Richard Cox. And also I'm on YouTube. I think right now, I'm at 2,600 videos uploaded.
And if you want to see magic happen, get in an argument with a truther and suddenly Adam Fitzgerald will pop up and fucking start defending you.
Yeah, I'm not, and also I'm glad you brought this up, by the way, Tommy, because I'm in an email conversation with former Architects and Engineers founder Richard Gage.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not gonna call him out, but in other words, he called me a troll in it. And I said to him, you were just on the biggest platform in your life with Patrick Bet-David and Valuetainment. And if you don't know,
he was on there. Yeah, I know that show.
Huge platform. Millions of people watch that. And he basically couldn't tell you if the world was round definitively. He basically said we probably didn't land on the moon. He's alluding to it. So I called him out on it. I said, look what you did. You basically, even if you told the truth about what happened at the World Trade Center, you lost so many millions of people with, by saying, well, we really don't know if we landed on the moon. We really don't know if the world is flat or not. Right? You know how many people you turned out? And you know what that means in the public eye to the 9/11 truth movement? Oh, they're all like that. Are they all crazy? Right? So they generalize. So because of me critiquing him, and I did a video on this, it was a 3-hour video I did with Ed Brotherton, Darren Harvey, and Sean Russell. And basically he said, you've been trolling me all this time. And I said, I'm not trolling you. I said, I'm cleaning the mess that you're creating for yourself. And basically, lending, these fringe theories that go to dead ends. I've been doing this for some time because I actually care.
Right.
Because I want people to come away with information that they can, know and use maybe
Right.
To prosecute somebody or go to court or create video. Because I always say, people that follow me on YouTube, I don't want them to just follow me. I'm hoping that the people I'm reaching, they create their own channels and they share information that they either learn from me or somebody else, and they create even bigger channels than I ever could. Well, that's how you build a movement.
Yeah.
You can't.
There are enough. There are so many people out there saying absurd things that makes people like you look wild. Like they make you look crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Right, because I dare question the government narrative.
And you have to wonder, like, how many, if any, are psyops.
That's a question I ask myself all the time. So I use it like this: like, only one person I would say that to, and that's Alex Jones, because he has a big audience. But to others, I wouldn't. I would just say it's ignorance.
Yeah. And yeah, well, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that because I have thoughts, but I just kind of keep those thoughts to myself when it comes to.
It's fine. I don't want this. I don't want this to become like a platform to basically slander anybody. So.
Right. So, all right, I can let's call it an end there, and I'm gonna stop the recording, and then we'll set up the next time, and we will keep rolling.